and hopefully in this meeting on time. I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, so keep that in mind. And with that, let's start with introductions. Carol, would you start?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Carol Ward. I'm a new addition to the team here at ADWR. I'm the Deputy Assistant Director with Water Planning and Permitting.
Ina Henningson, I manage the active management area section.
I'm Susan Craig at ASU's Kyle Center for Water Policy, sitting in for Sarah Porter.
Okay.
My name is Terry Sue Rossi, and I'm the manager for Arizona Water Company.
Good morning, Bruce Hallen, Salt River Project.
Chuck Cullum, Central Arizona Water Conservation District.
Philip Richards, APS.
Wade Noble, Yuma County Agriculture Water Coalition.
Patrick Adams, AMWA.
Ty Suplee, Audubon, Arizona.
Zach Richards, ADWR.
Cindy Rule, ADWR, and staff support to the Governor's Council.
Kelly Brown, ADWR Deputy.
Ernesto Murphy, Central Arizona Water Conservation.
Jake Linder King, Global Water.
Joseph Sig, I'm with Buckeye Water Conservation Drainage District.
Scott Miller with APS.
Teresa Wiskowski, City of Glendale.
Gretchen Irwin, City of Goodyear.
Pam Hughes, Arizona State Land Department.
Doug Dunham, FCOR. Maybe Carson, one thing.
Brett Eklund, ADWR. Steve Moore, City of Yuma.
Alicia Plana,
Sheila Schmidt, City of Buckeye.
Ron Whitler, City of Buckeye.
Dallas Myring with Veritas, representing both Mohawk, UVA, and Tucson Electric.
Chris Conner, City Channel.
Jeff Cross from High Ground, here on behalf of a number of NOVA clients.
Jay Tompkins with the Intertribal Council.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Cindy.
We have four on the line.
Would we go ahead and get the introductions from those on the line?
Yeah, this is John Rasmussen with Reclamation.
This is Michael Norris with Reclamation.
Carrie Thomas, Reclamation.
Is there one more?
That's it.
Oh, that's it? And then we had walk in.
Yeah, there's a couple of Juliet McKenna.
Oh, that's ADWR.
Okay. And then the ones that just walked in, do you mind?
Yeah, Noel Carter with Buckeye Water Conservation and Drainage District.
Thanks, Noel.
Mike Pierce with Buckeye Water Conservation District.
Debbie T. Gladden.
And I think she went to get you chairs.
Well, they spotlight right up there.
We've got.
Hey, you're welcome to sit at the table.
Sit at the table.
Five chairs.
Yeah.
We need to take the chairs as a table, please, so, because we're running out of wall space. And here you are, gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Give Louise just a few seconds here, and then we'll have Anav start with her presentation of the Buckeye waterlogged area.
Mr. Chair, member of the committee. I don't have a presentation. I just understood that there were some questions about brackish water regulations and waterlogged area regulations. So I just came to answer those questions from last meeting.
Okay.
So we understood that one of the questions were, is there a difference in regulation for brackish groundwater and regular groundwater withdrawals? The answer for that is no. Groundwater is regarded the same if it's brackish or non-brackish groundwater, so there are no separate regulations for brackish groundwater that are different. Moving on to other questions that came in regards to the Buckeye waterlogged area, and if there are specific differences in the regulations for Buckeye waterlogged area, specifically with groundwater withdrawal. So Within the waterlogged area, they still need to comply with the same groundwater regulations that apply within the AMA. However, there are exemptions specified in ARS 45-411, and in somebody has something? No. In general, entities that are located within the Baca waterlogged area are exempt from irrigation water duties, from conservation requirements for distribution of groundwater that are specified within the management plans, as well as groundwater withdrawal fees. So these are the specific exemptions for the Baca waterlogged area or the entities that withdraw water within that area. There was a question regarding replenishment obligations. So under ADWR assured water supply rules, groundwater withdrawn within the area is considered consistent with the active management areas and the management goals, as long as the groundwater is exempt from conservation requirements under that title that I just mentioned. So groundwater currently is not object to replenishment obligations. However, the entities will still need to become members of the CAGRD, even though requirements, replenishment obligations are not required, because the exemptions are currently set to sunset in 2025. So if they do not continue, then replenishment obligations will take place. And if you have any questions or clarification, please let me know. There was a question about permits that are required to pump brackish groundwater, or again, water from the waterlogged designation area, and the length of these permits. So there's several different permits for withdrawing water, and just in general, any entity that interested in withdrawing groundwater within the AMAs, regardless if it's in the Baca waterlogged area or outside of it, from a non-exempt well, must either have a grandfather right or a groundwater withdrawal permit. The permits are specified in ARS, in Article 7, starting from ARS 45-511, so I can just go through them. So there is general industrial use permit, hydrologic testing permits, temporary permits for electrical energy generation, and these specifically for emergency situations, mineral extraction, metallurgical processing permits, dewatering permits, drainage water withdrawal permits, as well as poor quality groundwater withdrawal permits. So these are all the permits that can be granted, and they are on a case-by-case basis. So an entity would apply to ADWR requesting a permit. ADWR will have to evaluate and then approve or deny the permit, depending, of course, on the different criteria for each of those permits. And lastly, we understood there was a question about the hydrological study that is being completed for the Baca waterlogged area. So just wanted to provide you with some information on that. And for those who may not be familiar with this, so ADWR is required by statute to submit recommendation to the governor, the president of the Senate, and the speaker of the House of Representatives regarding extending the Baca waterlogged area exemptions that I just described. And make a recommendation if those exemptions should go beyond the expiration date of January 1st of 2025. We did have initial consultation with stakeholders earlier this year, and we are anticipating another consultation meeting coming soon. So staff is currently in the process of developing a model to assist us in the review of the hydrologic conditions within the Baca waterlogged area, and then we would create a report and make recommendation on whether we recommend to extend the exemptions beyond the deadline. And this is what I understood were the questions that came from the previous meeting. Again, if there are any other questions related to this, I'll be happy to attempt and answer those.
Do you know when your study will be done?
Our deadline is December 15 of this year, so December 15, I believe, or December 14 of 2019.
Go ahead.
So, what discretion does the department have on the duration of the extension if one were to be recommended?
I don't think that we have gotten to this part yet. We are now in the process of evaluating the conditions and developing the model. So as soon as we do that and get more answers from what we find, we would probably have more information on that.
Right, so the question is there guidance in the statute on, the duration for an extension, like no more
For the
than 5?
land?
Yeah, for the waterlogged area.
I don't believe so. Kelly, do you by any chance remember? I don't believe there is a deadline or a time frame. Doug?
I worked on that statute. It is based on the hydrologic conditions, is the way it's worded. So the hydrologic study is how long. So it's going to be based on what the modeling tells the department.
So just to clarify, the department is preparing a groundwater model with a range of assumptions about future extractions in the region, mass balance to determine if at some future, if there is persistent waterlogging that could or that may or may not support a recommendation, and the duration of that recommendation, if one were to be made, would be based on the expected duration of the waterlogging conditions as determined from the model.
Yes, so the model will provide us with more information, and then we will be able to first recommend whether to extend those exemptions or not, and also address the time frame for extension.
Okay, I can be taught. That's good. Thanks.
And if there is interest, and I suspect there is, whenever we release this report or have more information, we'll be happy to have the chief hydrologist come and talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll plan on that. Thank you for that. Any other questions from the committee? I think
Will there be a summary of what she said?
the questions and the answers
Yeah.
from DWR?
There will be, the summaries that we post of these meetings are pretty general, will not be the details, but we do post the recording,
Okay.
so you'll be able to hear every word. Okay, thank you, on the website.
And I'll be happy to touch base with you after the meeting.
Are members of the, to make a comment?
A comment or a question? Go ahead.
A comment, I think, is fair.
Okay.
I'm here on behalf of the Water Conservation and Drainage District, and we attended the meeting that you all had to discuss the waterlogging study, and we raised this point there, and I'm going to raise it again. The water in the shallow alluvial aquifer underneath our agricultural land is within the saturated floodplain Holocene alluvium, if people understand that term, and it's decreed surface water rights for the overlying lands under the Benson-Allison decree. We think that the water is not anything but surface water under our agricultural lands, and yet it continues to be addressed by DWR as if it were exclusively legally classified as surface water. We think that assumption allows permits to be issued under groundwater laws, withdrawals to be made under surface area rights under groundwater laws, but no such authority exists for the withdrawals under surface water laws. And I'd like to see this department at least address this subject at some point before the committee or anyone else gets too far down the road on the believed unlimited right to pull that water out. And I say that because these farmers have been there 100 years. This is their water supply. If somebody else comes and takes it, it puts them out of business. That's a very serious consequence, and one that we'd like to see addressed at the level of your committee and by the department as it proceeds in doing these hydrologic analyses, because I think if you do that analysis fairly, and with the terms of Keeper 4, this water has to be classified as surface water.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think it's a good point. And I don't claim to be an expert on the regulations and the legal hurdles in this area. I think that there's going to be many, and I think that we do need to be fair. So what would the committee think about forming a subcommittee to look at some of these issues, the regulatory, legal issues, that face a project in this area, and vetting it out there? Bruce?
I would agree with Mike that I think that has to occur on what type of water is this water. It's the legal priority of this water, type of water. So I agree that that does need to be addressed.
Yeah, and I think that since we started the process at the previous meeting to identify constraints that are impediments to any concept development, that it would make sense to have a group devoted to really digging into those constraints and reporting back to this committee for discussion.
Anyone else?
Cartoon Urban Water Manager for the City of Goodyear. Our service area is within half of the Buckeye Waterlogged area. We already run desal. We feel like concerning on water supply, if you want to take certain waterlogged area with quality groundwater, any decrease in water levels will impact our physical availability. We need to take that into consideration. We're already using that water.
Well, I think that's why it would be great to have folks who are in that space sit down and define those details. So before folks get really excited about a concept, it's well understood what the opportunities and real constraints are. So is that something that you would like to sit down and talk about?
Yes.
That's
very interesting.
Yeah, and I think as this project gets shaped, those around the table and others may be the beneficiary of a project like this. So it's not necessarily determined yet who the user would be. It's just a desal committee to desalt some high TDS water. So all of those things are up for discussion, who the user is and how we get there.
A Buckeye farmer also. We've farmed, the district has farmed for over 100 years, 80-something, water rights on my farm is 1893. We use that water now. What you call brackish water is good water for us. We grow crops with it. And so we need to put a number on what TDS, what is brackish water. I look on my iPad and it says anything over 1,000 parts per million. Well, we use water that's up to 3,200 parts per million. So we need to know what you're talking about. And the other thing that I'd like to mention, like Goodyear, Buckeye is a big area. And when we all finish farming down there, they're going to need all that water for Buckeye and Goodyear. So those are things we need to all be accounted for.
Yeah, agreed. So it sounds like a subcommittee to look at all of these issues and then come back with maybe some limits or those types of things proposed, drafted, would be a good idea. Is everybody okay with us heading in that direction? Okay.
I'm with the city of Buckeye, and I support that. The historic part of the city of Buckeye is in the Buckeye water area.
Sure.
So we used to operate wells in that area, and we had an EDR plant to reduce the TDS, but so part of our service areas in the Buckeye waterlogged area, and probably 2,500 customers, probably 7,500 people in Buckeye are in the Buckeye waterlogged area. Those figures might not be, but there's quite a few customers that are in the Buckeye waterlogged area, and we do have wells in there that were operated at one time by the city or were installed more recently by developers for the city, and so we share it with the farmers, and we certainly want what's good for the Buckeye Water Conservation and Drainage District, but it's part of our future water supply, and the poor quality water doesn't stop at the boundary of the Buckeye waterlogged area. We have wells that are a mile or two north of the Buckeye waterlogged area, and when we get down in the lower alluvial unit and drill down to depths of certain depths, the TDS went up to 10,000, so it's not. We have poor quality groundwater issues in southern Buckeye that extend beyond the boundary of the Buckeye waterlogged area. But yes, we definitely would be interested in being part of that subcommittee.
Okay, great, and I think that's a good point too. Maybe the boundary changes, or even what we call it, is something different as we really take a look at that high TDS water, that salty water, or saltier water. So let me work with DWR, and for the sake of time, we'll send out emails and get that subcommittee set up. And you might think about who you want from your organization to be on that committee. Hopefully they're small. It's a smaller team, not doesn't fill the room like this meeting does. But we'd like to have representation from those interested. Very good. Anything else on the Buckeye waterlogged area before we move to DEQ's presentation?
So I just wanted to, maybe for the sake of the notes I heard, was that Goodyear, Buckeye Water Conservation District, APS, I wanted to see CAP's interest in participating. Obviously, DWR, you might want to ask if anybody else around the table wants to be in this group at this juncture. SRP?
You're going to be on it?
Okay, Chuck's going to be on it. Is Chuck going to be on it?
And Wade's on it.
My partner, Wade.
Very good.
Friend and partner, Wade. EPCOR.
How about someone from DEQ? We'll ask them.
All right.
Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to right now.
No
I can
worries.
take that request back.
Please do.
But I'll just send you a note with, just the list of hands raised at this juncture that might help start your conversation.
Great. Okay, let's go to the update ADQ has on primacy assumption for deep well injection of brine.
So, thank you, Chairperson, committee members. I don't have a nifty PowerPoint presentation today because one's not really needed. Looking at pictures of holes in the ground, while I find that thrilling as a geologist, doesn't get a whole lot of play in the broader community. I do want to beg your forgiveness as I found out that a recharge basin in southern Arizona, not only great for recharging aquifers, it's also great for growing ragweed. So if my voice cracks a little bit, that's why, and I apologize. My name's Dave Dunaway. I'm the manager of groundwater protection and water reuse value streams upstairs at DEQ. And since this has a broader community attached to it, let me zoom out to about 30,000 feet and talk about what underground injection control is. Programmatically, legally, it's a portion of the safe drinking water that allows for in-ground disposal of water, solution mining, or storage and recovery of water. So it's near and dear to this group's mission, our ADWR's mission, and we'll touch on something else in a second. ADEQ does have a statutory mandate to go out and obtain the UIC program from the EPA. Here's a bit why it's important for Arizona overall. ADEQ is going to be able to facilitate wells that allow for disposal of brine. This impacts water augmentation in two big ways. One, if you have a supply of brackish groundwater, which may be about to be defined a little bit better, you could pull the salt out, and instead of having a football-sized evaporation basin, which no one really likes looking at, well, you can put it in ground and way below better quality water, right? The other thing is if you're doing advanced treatment for the reuse of water, say direct potable reuse or any type of water treatment, specifically that's including reverse osmosis, your brine may have a better home in ground way below anything else that's drinkable. Again, this is an existing program at the federal level. Many facilities right now are, unfortunately in my mind, dual regulated. You carry both an APP from my group as well as a federal level UIC permit. By obtaining this program, we will be removing this duplicative nature. We are working to take over the program from the EPA. My biased opinion is that ADEQ has a history of issuing permits faster than the EPA, a better track record of problem solving Arizona's issue with Arizona's customers, and in general, a better understanding of Arizona's unique environment than outside folks do. The UIC program adoption or assumption, depending on who you talk to, became a DEQ strategic project at the start of fiscal year 18, so a little over a year and a half ago. We started with the knowledge that a similar attempt was made back in the late 1990s to go and get this program, and it was ultimately unsuccessful. So our first attempt did not work. At the time, we could not convince EPA that the Aquifer Protection Permit Program was as strong as UIC. And that's because it's not, quite simply. Our approach this time is that we are going to copy and paste the federal rules as much as possible into Arizona's rules. This is going to, I think, solve their earlier objections while allowing a much smoother transition, as it's what the customers are already used to. ADEQ started out by visiting 3 states with the successful underground injection control programs: Wyoming, North Dakota, and Texas. Took lessons learned from that, ultimately again came to the conclusion that copying existing federal rules is probably the way to go for us. As of 2 Sundays ago, those rules have been drafted, and so this is the first time I get to announce publicly that we've drafted those rules. EPA gets the first bite at the apple. They're going to make sure that we're in as alignment as we hope we are. Occasionally there's a difference of opinion. Once that we can get on the same page with EPA, we're going to allow unofficial comment from the broader stakeholder community, some of who are in the room right now. So you'll be able to see, did we meet our goals of being allowed, how do I phrase this? Our goals of honoring the unofficial stakeholder input we received, as well as making sure we're still doing something that's good for Arizona. Where are we going in this case? We're hoping to get comments back from the EPA mid-September timeframe. We're hoping to have external, unofficial review of rules mid-October. We're going to be starting the GWAICC process thereafter, ultimately with a goal of having a program in mid to late 2020. Now's as good time of any for questions. If anybody wanted to know more about UIC or anything else DEQ is doing that I can answer.
Go ahead.
Could you share the timeline with us, like some sort of, I don't know, or if you could direct us to your website where we can find that information?
I can, and so we can work with Cindy to get the more official timeline up and open, absolutely.
I have a question. What is GWAICC?
Oh, goodness. So term of art, the Governor's Regulatory Review Council. We're still operating under a rulemaking moratorium. We want to make sure, doubly sure, that the rule changes we make work for the broader state of Arizona. So that is where the democracy or its implementation gets to tell the bureaucracy what to do.
Thank you.
So you said that the EPA review is currently going?
Yes. So
what's their deadline?
Gentle person's agreement for 30 days of their review. With the similarity between what we've drafted and what they already have, we're hoping for sooner, and we're certainly hoping for no questions or concerns. Wouldn't be the first time a monkey wrench has been thrown in there, but we're hopeful that by mid-September we have their very minimal comments back to us.
You mentioned that you guys tried to model as much as possible. Can you give us some examples of where you deviated?
The obvious one is to change regional administrator to director. The other example that I have where there is a deviation is because this touches on septic tanks ultimately, which is a means of disposal for water. EPA uses a per-person definition of if you are serving 20 or more people, you're a large capacity septic tank. We use a flow-based determination at DEQ, so rather than 20 people, we're saying 3,000 gallons in order to harmonize better with the existing aquifer protection program. Those are the two big ones. Really everything else is functionally straightforward. We're also using existing state authority regarding what is a hazardous waste. Instead of pointing to the CFR, we're pointing to our statute and rules. Other examples in that line include ADHS's rules on laboratory methods rather than federal. Where possible and that there's a good fit, we use something Arizona already has as opposed to leaning on the CFR. You'd be surprised how many times administrator just shows up in that document, and it takes a little more effort than Control-C, Control-V. So those are the big things out front.
Other questions? So if our goal is to get a deep well injection permit submitted, when approximately do you think it would be good to submit that?
Well, I would say today, because the federal government can certainly issue that permit. We're hoping for speed, efficiency, better understanding of the geology of Arizona so that you're not reinventing the wheel each time, but nothing precludes you from going out and getting what's called a Class 1 municipal disposal well with the EPA right now. I like to think we're a bit friendlier about the whole thing. Again, there's some synergy, but nothing precludes folks from getting out getting a UIC permit right now. In fact, we have a couple of solution mines in Arizona right now operating.
So, just the underground injection control permit, are you allowed to inject in a potable aquifer?
So you have to do one of two things, and keep in mind that DEQ treats all aquifers ultimately as underground sources of drinking water.
That was essentially my point.
Right. So under the federal program, you have to get what's called an aquifer exemption. You have to carve out a section of a potentially drinkable aquifer. And while DEQ is going to assist in that determination, that remains the purview of the federal government to carve something out. Functionally, it's very similar to the pollution management area of an aquifer protection permit, where your activities shall not influence any underground source of drinking water or any aquifer outside of that line of demarcation, the pollution management area.
How many of these GWAICCs have been issued to date?
So Arizona has 3 Class 3 underground injection control projects. Florence Copper, Excelsior, as well as Morton Salt, because the salt conditions leading to the West Valley's high salinity stem from the Luke Salt Dome, right? So it's a great place for salt. Those are the big ticket individual UIC permits. The wrinkle, and there's a whole lot of nuance with this, is there's a broad universe of Class 5 underground injection wells, which include dry wells that DEQ already permits, large capacity septic tanks that DEQ and the counties co-permit, aquifer storage and recovery wells, and a whole universe of minimally impactful activities. The rule as it exists, you're supposed to already be notifying the federal government if you're doing a Class 5 disposal well, aquifer storage and recovery, other things of that nature. We're finding that most people don't do that. DEQ, for our part, when we register a dry well, issue a septic tank permit, does beam that up to the EPA already. So if you're looking for the total number of UIC permits, or authorizations by rule even, there's about 3 Arizona big-ticket individual permits, and somewhere on the order of 100,000 plus Class 5 permits.
What was 3 again? There was Florence Copper?
Florence Copper, there is the Gunnison project in Cochise County that is owned by Excelsior, and then Morton Salt, which is in the West Valley. So those have EPA existing permits. There may be a handful of other ones. Those tend to draw the interest. We're finding that the EPA has issued other aquifer exemptions, but there are no permits around that. There is one aquifer exemption in southern Pinal County that doesn't have a permit attached to it anymore.
So how is seismicity part of the criteria for these types of permits?
For the Class 6 world, it is expressly called out in rule, and those are carbon sequestration wells.
Sure.
In a broader sense, there is a prohibition against damaging an underground source of drinking water. So if we're aware of seismic conditions that would impair that aquifer, it's completely fair game. The rules are way more vague on that, and it's leading to more of a technical determination that this won't cause an impact. Class 6 world, it is very strict, very prescriptive. You see things like no seismic conditions are present. In the other well classes, it has to do more with technical judgment and appropriate of the aquifer exemption, but you don't see that, you don't see the word seismic in those rules per se.
So as I understand it, just conceptually, deep well injection for brine disposal feels like which class to you?
If it's done by a municipality, it's a Class 1. If it's not under a municipality, it might be under the broader umbrella of Class 5. We at DEQ would go, hey, do you need an individual permit for that, or are you okay to operate with just letting us know, basically? So on top of this, we still have the APP program as well.
Understood. So recognizing that a private water company would be a municipality?
What I would want to do is dig back into the rules that to make sure, but I would think that would be more of a Class 5. At least what it says on the rule package is municipal waste disposal well. I a bit chagrined that I don't have the definition for municipality ready to go, so I don't know if it's ultimately municipal-derived waste or done by a municipality.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and it just trying to understand, you gave us an example of one class which has specificity about, what the public could be deeply concerned about is micro-earthquakes or real seismicity.
Yeah.
Since it's in the papers, right? And trying to figure out if the rule set has any, again, specificity in which classes. So class 6, yes, everything else sounds like it's framed around no harm to the aquifer.
Yes, that's a fair statement.
Right, and that's a loose definition at best, I would think.
That is also a fair statement, and it's interesting watching the evolution of EPA's rules through the various classes.
Sure.
As they decide, okay, we're going to allow this with this fence post, these fences. The most recent, the Class 6 rules, that's where you see the very prescriptive natures. And obviously when you're dealing with the types of pressures needed for carbon sequestration, you can see why. But as a geologist, I sort of appreciate the fossil record as they tighten up and get more defined thanks to legal challenges one way or the other, leading to a more complete prescriptive set of rules at the tail end of the rule, as opposed to the vague and general prohibitions on the earlier classes.
Yeah, it's hard. Anyway, thank you.
So I think at this point I'd like to ask the committee what they'd like to see for next steps. We're going to discuss the legal and regulatory hurdles of desalination in the state. We probably should address the disposal hurdle. Do we want to request proposals, ultimately do a pilot? Where would the committee like to head next on this topic?
I just have one observation, which is it might be interesting for when the draft is available, for the committee to have an opportunity to review it and explore whether this committee would want to submit comments as the rule is developed, as a way to understand more about whether there's interest in a cooperative pilot test. I think ultimately that is probably where we need to have a conversation, but my first suggestion would be to sort of better understand the permit, and maybe that's a question from DEQ, is the permitting for pilots different than a full-blown permit? Is there?
Yeah, so if you look again to the Class 6 world, you're allowed pilot tests under Class 5, and I think that would be your likely fit, because there is rule language describing honest-to-goodness production and impact versus let's see how this is going to go. One of the things that I've appreciated handling the rule changes for water reuse is making sure that we do have a pilot project or at least a straw man example to see how this rule is actually going to work and be implemented. And if you have ideas for that, or the committee has ideas for that, we'd certainly love to walk that through the steps that we envision right now.
Yeah, I think it's good. Let's do that. And so we'll essentially work with DEQ as we go through public comments, which should be available in a few days after EPA is done with their comments.
Yeah, and that is our rulemaking process before we go through GWAICC involves an informal comment period for stakeholders, of which I think a lot of folks in this room are. So So we'll happily work with Cindy to also get that out when it's available for review for everybody.
And so the goal then will be to submit a permit, hopefully at some point in the future where it doesn't have to go through the federal process.
Correct.
Okay. So it delays maybe a little bit, but ultimately it may be quicker because we're just working with the state of Arizona.
Yeah, we're working with the state of Arizona on state of Arizona issues, which is a place I at least like to be. So,
Can we just clarify, or maybe I misunderstood something you said earlier, which is the determination of the non-potable portion of a deemed potable aquifer is still in the federal province, or will that translate back to DEQ?
No, that is always, because that has to be reflected in the Federal Register, that you have issued this aquifer exemption for this area. That always remains with the federal government. What DEQ does in this case is provides the homework, if you will, the justification for that to happen, or not in the event that we disagree with the permittee.
Okay. But so that still has the federal nexus.
That still has the federal nexus.
Okay.
And we have, I believe, 4 of these in Arizona right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, very good. Any other questions, comments on that one? Are we ready to move on? Let's talk about the historical information on the Yuma desalting plant. And on the phone, Mike, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Would you give us an update or the information you have on the YDP?
Sure. I'm also here with Terry Thomas. She's our new area manager for the Yuma area office in Yuma, Arizona. So she'll also participate in the conversation. I'm going to start out by talking about the current legislation that's associated with the Yuma desalting plant. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Yuma desalting plant itself, and then one of our success stories, which is Yuma desalting plant pilot run in 2010. Then Terry will follow up with current status, and then we'll take questions after that discussion. So let me start with the current legislation. As you're aware, the Colorado River water is shared by 7 basin states and the Republic of Mexico. Under a 1944 treaty, the U.S. ensured the annual delivery of 1.5 million acre-feet of water at the Mexico and at the northern and southerly international boundary. Currently, it's 1.36 million acre-feet at the northern international boundary near Morales Dam, and 140,000 acre-feet at the southern international boundary near San Luis, Arizona. In the late 1950s, saline drainage flows from the developing Welton Mohawk Irrigation and Drainage District in southwest Arizona began entering the Colorado River, lowering the quality of water being delivered to Mexico. For the folks that are aware, it was delivered approximately at what we call double aught. In the 1960s, the salinity impacts of the lower Colorado River agriculture and drainage returns began exceeding 1,400 parts per million. To address this issue and establish a permanent level of salinity for the Colorado River water delivered to Mexico, Minute 242 of the 1940 treaty was agreed upon by the United States and Mexico in 1983. Minute 242 provides a permanent and definitive solution to the international problem of the salinity of the Colorado River by, first, establishing Colorado River salinity differential, the NIB, which is 115 parts plus or minus 30 parts per million. In the United States, it stipulates that the construction of the bypass drain from Morales Dam to Arizona-Sonora International Boundary, and in Mexico, it stipulates the construction of the bypass drain from the Arizona-Sonora International Boundary to the Santa Clara Slough, formerly known as Ciena de Santa Clara. Provides for delivery of approximately 140,000 acre-feet, as I described earlier, of water to Mexico at the southern international boundary, with the salinity substantially the same. Water is customarily delivered there. So ideally, historically, 140,000 is basically the amount of water that was delivered at that point. We typically use groundwater wells and drainage water from the Yuma Mesa in the Yuma Valley. Along the international border limits to groundwater pumping in the 5-mile zone. So that's that was the terms of the Minute 242. So to be able to fund this, the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Act, which is known as Title I authority, was provided. It was enacted in 1974 and authorized the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture and Interior to implement measures that enhance the improvement of water quality of the Colorado River system for use in the United States and Mexico. I talked earlier about the salinity differential of 150 parts per million plus 30, which is 145 parts, and that the Salinity Control Act focused on that area for what we call salinity differential. Comply with Minute 242 without depriving the basins of their appropriated water. So to ensure that there was a vision to construct the Yuma desalting plant. The funding authority allowed the implementation methods to reduce Colorado River salinity from Welton Mohawk Division, construct and operate and maintain the Yuma desalting plant, and authorize the construction of projects that are stipulated in Minute 242. And primarily the projects again were extending the bypass drain in the United States, also in Mexico, and also ensuring the 140,000 acre feet of delivery at SIB. So let me move on to the Yuma desalting plant itself. The Yuma desalting plant was envisioned to desalinate the bypass flow on average of 108,000 acre feet per year that was being bypassed at the time. Each gallon recovered by the plant makes a gallon available in the system storage for United States use. The plant is designed for 72 million gallons per day, as it's currently configured. However, it can operate in thirds. It's the largest brackish water plant in the United States, second largest in the world. It utilizes conventional pretreatment and salicylic acetate RO membrane. So as far as the pretreatment, it's predominantly chemical treatment. On the RO side, it's reverse osmosis technology, 2-1 type array design. The two things that feed the drag in the Yuma desalting plant, or the cost, is the chemicals on the pretreatment and energy on the RO side. It was completed in 1991. The plant was operationally tested at 1/3 capacity for a 9-month period in 1992 and 1993 to determine whether it would perform as designed. The test was cut short due to Gila River flood damage to the intake canal. So a lot of the funding that was appropriated was diverted for maintenance and repair of those canal systems. During the flood, surplus and normal water conditions plant priority were unnecessary. In 1993, since 1993, the plant has been maintained in what we call a ready reserve standby status. Presently, Welton Mohawk Irrigation Drainage District flows are bypassed around the plant, flowing directly to the Santa Clara wetlands in Mexico. Diverting these flows before they reach the Colorado River helps the U.S. meet the salinity requirements without operating the plant, but this water is not counting as part of the U.S. annual treaty delivery of the 1.5 million acre feet at the northern and southern international boundary. Water flows to the Cienega de Santa Clara wetlands since completion of the bypass drain in 1978 created about a 15,200 acre wetland in Mexico. In 2007, we operated the plant at 10% capacity for 3 months. It was called the demonstration run. The purpose was that to see if the plant would run or would function. Since that 2007 and 2010, the plant was operated and tested, which was formerly called the Yuma desalting plant pilot run. But I'd like to spend a little time talking about the pilot run because it's considered a success story of the operation of the Yuma of the facility. Including reclamation, there was 3 funding partners: Central Arizona Water Conservation District, Southern Nevada Water Authority, and Metropolitan Water District. The characteristics of the pilot run: it operated up to 1/3 capacity for 365 days within a 12 to 18 month period. We operated at 1/3 capacity to reflect actual design, so we didn't deviate from the original design intent. The reason for the 365 days was to cover the seasonal variation and provide adequate time to achieve the purpose of the run. The purpose of the run was to gather performance and cost data, determine where any additional corrective actions and plans were necessary for long-term operations. When we operated in 1992 and 1993, between that period, we did a lot of capital design efficiency corrections. We wanted to be able to test those design changes that were implemented. So let's talk about the outcome of the Yuma desalting plant pilot run. It successfully achieved all 3 objectives that was just stated. Completed ahead of schedule and under budget. Had a 100% safety record. Complied with all federal, state, and local requirements. Operated continuously at a 100% on-stream factor, which is really unheard of any desalting plant. Recovered 30,496 acre-feet of water, which is about 9.6 billion gallons. Post-run inspections revealed that the plant had normal wear and tear. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Terry talk a little bit about the current status.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. This is Terry Thomas. I'm the new area manager at the Yuma area office in Yuma. I'm glad to be here with you today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the current status. Keep in mind, I've been there about 6 months, so I've been getting all kinds of desalination lessons from my expert here, Mike. So right now, as we're running, the plant is being maintained in kind of what we call the ready reserve status, which is maintenance ready standby status. A portion of the plant currently provides the power, the potable water, fire protection, those kinds of services for all of the employees in the administrative complex part of YAO, which is the Yuma area office. And that's, the plant is in the same complex. So we also have drills on, chemical safety, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all one big complex, and the plant provides us with the potable water that we need to drink and other services. We know that we've got some improvements and some upgrades that are necessary for the long-term sustained plant operations. And we're completing, along the way, some capital improvement projects as federal funding becomes available. So that's kind of where we're at on current status. Let me stop and check in with everybody. Are there any questions that we can answer for you at this point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Welcome, Terry. Congratulations. This is Chuck Cullum with CAP. Congratulations on being Yuma Area Office Manager. I'm sure you'll hear more from the committee over time. My question for you is, what is your estimated cost to operate the plant on a per acre foot basis? I know that we had some cost data from the pilot run. I just wonder if that information is still valid or if you have an update.
So the information that we currently have associated with that is of course that 1/3 operation. So it's approximately probably not much far from what the Yuma from the pilot run information from that documentation is. Of course, it's going to be a little higher because of increased costs since then and escalation. So it's probably about $538 per acre foot. But if you want to put the amortized cost in there, that would be another $149, so it'd be around $700. If you add the two together, it's like $743 or something. I don't have a calculator in front of me, but it would be up in the $700 range if you use the amortized costs associated with that.
So that would be other people's costs, right? The federal government doesn't amortize its capital investment, but just 538 is a good number for labor, chemicals, and power, right?
Yes. Yeah, it would be chemicals, power, energy.
Yeah. So could you comment, Mike, on the monitoring of the Cienega that was undertaken during the pilot run?
Yes, we did do it during the pilot run, which is an appendix in the YDP pilot run report.
So maybe I'll elaborate. The funders for the pilot operation, CAWCD, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and the Southern Nevada Water Authority, through a cooperative agreement with the International Boundary and Water Commission, U.S. and Mexican section, funded monitoring of the environmental values of the Cienega de Santa Clara before, during, and after the pilot operation at 1/3 to determine if there were adverse environmental impacts to an important environmental resource for both the United States and Mexico. The Cienega hosts, houses, protects one of the most important populations of Yuma clapper rail, which is a bird that is listed as endangered in both the United States and Mexico. And so in order to operate the plant, we were very interested in making sure that we weren't causing harm to environmental resources that benefit both the U.S. and Mexico. Carl Flessa from the University of Arizona led the binational monitoring effort, and he reported that there were variations in salinity delivered to the Cienega, but it is a robust and resilient resource that came through relatively unscathed from the operation.
Other questions? Go ahead, Bruce.
Hi, Terry. This is Bruce Allen with Salt River Project. You mentioned some upgrades and capital improvement projects. Could you describe what those are at YDP?
Sure. There's approximately 7 capital projects that need to be done. It's in the YDP pilot report. It's really no different. That's what's already listed there. But I'll give several examples. For example, the chlorine system has to be upgraded. The ammonia system has to be installed. We don't have an ammonia system. The filter valves would have to be replaced. And that's actually, that project is actually currently happening. Our A22 22-mile line, sludge line, would have to be replaced because it's met its life expectancy at 30 years when it was first installed. To bring chemicals in, we would have to look at the railroad system to bring bulk chemicals in. If we operate above 1/3, there's no way we can bring those type of chemicals in. And plus, with ADQ type limitations on disposal of what I consider of waste, we have to look at pulverizing the lime pebble. So we have to put a lime pulverization system in, so we can crush the rocks and process those type of process that kind of information. So those are some examples. Of course, with an age facility, we have to look at upgrading plant instrumentation when the time comes. We're not going to do it now because there's no reason to do it, because plant instrumentation, especially on the analytical side, would be deteriorate before we have plans to use them. So we're going to wait till it's time to operate, and that kind of stuff is off the shelf anyways. It's readily available. So those are some examples. So in the 2010 pilot run report, which is online, you can see the list of items, and there's really not much different than what you currently see there.
Thank you.
Well, Mike, you're going through a review of all that to upgrade cost estimates. Is that correct understanding?
Yes, we're currently working on that.
All right.
And I think that everyone there is facing the same dilemma that we are with the tariffs, the increased costs, the energy costs. It's kind of like a moving target. We're seeing things like 35-40% increase in costs. So when you have a facility like this at such a large scale, we would see exponential cost increase. So it's kind of a moving target when you're looking at capital investment, and so that of course would change that type of information on the cost.
When do you think you'll have those
also as far as plant
available?
operations, energy costs deviate, purchase of chemicals deviate. If manufacturing is really high, as you see it today, right? Because the economy is doing really well, you will see a much higher cost of chemicals. So.
When would you be able to share those numbers with us, those updated numbers?
Hi, and let me kind of come in on this one as well, because right now we're looking at making a more holistic view of what we've got to do and how all of this ties in together. As you know, we supply potable water to the administrative part of the structure, and we do a lot of other things that are connected. And what I'd like to do as coming in as the new area manager is just kind of get a better view of the whole picture, from operation of the plant itself to how that ties in and cost-wise, and what the cost benefits are back and forth between the admin building, supplying the water, supplying fire suppression. Then I got to take a look at the building, and I got to see what have I got to do to make improvements for life, health, safety for the building. So what I'd like to do is take the next year, and we've begun working on this already, take the next year to kind of get all of those facts and figures together and do truly a kind of a cost comparison to see where I'm at for a holistic view on operating costs for the whole complex.
So Terry, just to be clear, a year from now?
Yeah, we've started kind of about a year from now. I'm going to put together almost what you would call like a project management plan and approach it that way, where I've already got some alternatives that I'm looking at, and I've got some roads that I want to explore, and I'd like to come up with kind of a strategic roadmap on how we move forward in the future with the plant holistically, and also consider all of those costs. So over the next year, this is almost the end of my fiscal year, and I'm sure that upper management and reclamation is going to want to see some of those numbers and have several discussions about those numbers. So I've got to get all of that together. Then I've got to make sure that I've got everybody briefed up through reclamation, and I'm estimating about a year to get that done, to do a good job of it, a nice, thorough job of it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead.
I'm probably wondering this, but I heard the gentleman say something about when the time comes to operate the plant. When is that? When does that happen?
Would the Bureau like to answer that?
Wade has an opinion.
Did they hear it? That was a legitimate question.
Did you hear the question?
The gentleman who was speaking earlier said that you didn't want to do certain improvements until, when the time comes to operate the plant, which I get that, because the things decline over time. But I was just wondering, when does that time come? When do we operate the plant?
Well, we're as we said before, we're going to take a holistic view, and we're going to look at all of the things that go into operating the plant. You've got your choices of, I'm looking at a third operation, at a third capacity, but I also want to do those comparisons at a higher capacity. And when I get kind of into it a little bit more with some more numbers, then I'll have a better idea of, and I will also make that prediction, if you will, kind of in that report that I'm going to generate is, here's this, here are the costs for this, and this is what happens if we run the plant at 1/3 at this particular time period based on costs and amortization and stuff like that. So I really can't answer that at this point. I've got to get a little bit more into the details, and then I can have a better idea of what I'm looking at time-wise on a schedule.
So operating at full capacity, which I thought I heard you say was 70-something MGD?
72.
72 MGD. How much water do you estimate could be saved in an operating year at full capacity?
The conservative estimate is a 72 MGD plant. At full capacity, now recognize that the plant can operate in thirds. However, the feed into the plant would be approximately 100,000 acre feet. It would almost take all the water that's being bypassed to feed the plant. If you think of a glass of water, 100% full, which would be 100,000 acre feet, and you take 72% of that and you desalt it and put it back into the Colorado River, the remaining concentrate would be bypassed down to the Cienega. Hence the reason of the NGO's concerns about the impact of this Cienega. It would be at a higher concentration and a lower volume. So if the plant was to operate, there would be a lot of binational discussions with many stakeholders to even get through the environmental considerations.
But Mike, my question is just purely a technical one, which is, what is the capacity of the plant to save water at full capacity? Is it 75,000 acre feet at full capacity?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. 72 MGD would be approximately 75,000 acre feet. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I misunderstood the question.
No, that's fair.
Since I was on the topic of the Cienega, and Chuck, I really do appreciate your discussion on the data associated with the Cienega. But I do want to point out during the pilot run with the environmental in Mexico, it was a very good relationship that we had with them. It was a very good dialogue, and during that whole pilot run, the testing that was done in Mexico and the testing that was done in the United States, it was very cooperative, and it was a very cooperative type effort.
Thank you, Mike and Terry. I think that helps at least give us a ballpark of what it costs to run YDP. I think also on the flip side of that, the committee should understand what it costs Arizona not to run YDP. And I know there's a 24-month study that came out. I know we were very close to not being in Tier 0, but we will be in Tier 0. So if I could ask that we take a look at those numbers and see what is it really costing Arizona to not have YDP run.
Well, we're CAP, I think, with some discussion with DWR can calculate some of those impacts. I mean, just the ballpark number is that we found ourselves in Tier 0, that is the tier under the lower basin drought contingency plan, between elevation 1075 in Lake Mead and elevation 1090. We found ourselves 0.6 of a foot under elevation 1090 as projected in the August 24-month study. Our calculation is that that's equivalent to about 48 to 50,000 acre feet in Lake Mead. So in a hypothetical full operation of the Yuma desalting plant, it's very likely that we could have potentially have avoided 192,000 acre-foot reduction to Arizona's water supply, and 8,000 acre-feet of reduction to Nevada's water supply, and 41,000 acre-feet of reduction to Mexico's water supply under the drought contingency plan. That's a hypothetical. I'm not saying that the plant would have operated or this or that. It's just the value of operating the Yuma desalting plant is conserving water in Lake Mead that benefits water users in Arizona, Nevada, Mexico from some of these drought contingency plan impacts. It has that potential. But we can clarify that, and I'd like to do that with my colleagues in the Colorado River section of DWR.
So Chuck, would you be...
Clint, is that...
Do that.
Okay.
Be willing to work on that and then report back to the committee?
Yeah, and we'll have a conversation with Reclamation to make sure that they're comfortable with the assumptions we're making.
Very good. We'll plan on that for the next meeting. Any other questions for Mike and Terry? Yeah.
Talking a little while ago about the amortization capital costs, and he's talking about the plant at a third capacity. So is he amortizing a third of the cost of the plant, or is that $200, whatever it was, dollar number for the total amortization of the plant? You know, am I making any sense?
Okay.
Were you able to hear that? Okay.
Yes, I can. Let me clarify, because Chuck, you caught me cold on that one. So anyway, on the annualized cost, okay, the per acre foot, the annual is $583. I might have said $538. I might have transposed two numbers, but it's $583. And the one-time cost is $143 for a total of $726. And to answer your question, the amortized cost, that 143 is based on the amount of improvements that have to be done to get the plant operational only. It's not already sunk costs into the facility.
Very good. Thanks for clarifying that. Anyone else on YDP? If not, let's move on to closing remarks. I'll open it up, and then I got just a couple things I want to mention. Anyone have closing remarks? I think as we move forward, and in a couple weeks we'll be meeting with the council. I think it's an opportunity for me to give them an update, and they'll ask me to do that, I'm sure. But also, if we have any asks, if the committee has any asks from the council, it would be a good time to make those asks. Does the committee have anything that they would like me to ask on behalf of the committee? Such as, is there a need for financing any of these things to move them forward? Are we just kind of in a waiting pattern for now, and it'd be more appropriate at future meetings to have an ask like that?
I don't think we really have any agreement on anything to finance at this stage.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I think that the work of the subcommittee or the smaller group will, sort of frame whether, what types of, talking about multiple jurisdictions and all sorts of significant challenges. I think we might be ahead of ourselves to start talking about
and definitely
financial vehicles.
Yeah, and definitely when it comes to, an actual project funding that and those types of things. But even working with DEQ to do a pilot somewhere in the state for deep well injection, those types of things. Like maybe early now, maybe we can get some help to work with DEQ to answer some of those questions with a bigger project in mind at a future time.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful just to highlight that, you know, there may be an emergent opportunity to do something like a pilot test to push the deep well and the underground injection control concept to put, once the rules are put in place or developing, there may be an opportunity for some type of investment to clarify that for the good of the state. Because we've already identified that brine disposal is a significant impediment or uncertainty to the development of desal in Arizona.
Very good. Yeah, and I don't want to seem too pushy. I just want to get the feelings from the committee. But some of these questions will have to be answered at some point, and I would like to move this along and either have a project come to fruition or roll out some of these projects and keep everything moving forward. So keep that in mind, please.
Yeah, I had a question. At earlier meetings, there were some intriguing presentations on brine mineral reclamation, and I was curious if there was an update or an analysis. The presenter from Texas implied that they had viable emerging technology, and I don't know if that was a pitch or if that's something. I don't know if we know.
So they actually built a plant in Texas.
Right.
I've been there and saw the plant. It wasn't operating at that point. Does anybody have an update? I can call the director in El Paso, Texas, and see if I can get an update from him, or if he'd be willing to fly out here and either presentation or call in and give us an update at our next meeting. That's a good point. Okay, I'll do that. Anything else? Cindy?
Before we close, I just wanted to make that announcement. There'll be a couple of things coming to this group from this meeting, and Zach Richards is now going to be staff support from DWR for this committee. We're kind of equalizing out our duties so that I don't have all those committees and the council. And so you'll be seeing those coming from Zach and not me. And also, if you didn't sign in the sign-up sheets outside, it's really important that you do that.
And I just want to thank everyone for coming today, taking the time to come here. And then thank you to all the presenters today. We really appreciate that. And we'll organize the next meeting. We'll send out a notice. We may wait until after the council meeting to put a date to that. If that's all right with everyone.